Very spontaneous. I have done a lot of videos regarding my thesis. I've now finished. Um, I got a 12, the best grade that you can get, which is equivalent to an A plus. So that's pretty good. Now you can see the reflection, which is maybe better and less distractful. See if it works with these glasses. It's a little bit better, not the best. Yeah, maybe I will do this in the morning after. Yes, but this is I saw this as an opportunity to maybe use this platform for something now that I'm officially unemployed, right? And the idea is to do something that I'm interested in, but also something that can be useful and something that will help me develop. It is of course also made for other people to watch it, have fun. It's also going to be spontaneous. Let me tell you about this. This is an idea that I've had for a while. I've started writing a book. It's called The World View. It's about the economy as a whole. It's about the world, how it is put together, and how everything kind of makes sense, or at least from my perspective. And the idea is that I continuously develop writing this book. It's in the same kind of genre of The Wealth of Nation by the father of economics, Adam Smith. It's kind of more philosophical than it is pure data analytical research, which of course it might contain in the future as I progress in writing the book. This series is going to be called Karim Talks About Economics, as you can see from the title. And it goes into developing this book, but also it goes into discussing some things that I might find interesting. Three things that will define this podcast. I think that if this becomes big, I can maybe also put it on other streaming channels, services, Spotify, for example. But things that will make this podcast special, firstly, is it is going to be spontaneous. So everything that I say at the moment is not something that I've rehearsed. Doing this podcast is an idea that I got half an hour ago. So the idea is that I have something and I say it spontaneously. That means, of course, that which goes to the second characteristics of this, I'm going to be open-minded. I have a small page here where I've written a couple of notes, the basic notes, right? So 3 characteristics and the agenda for what I see this podcast being. But I have to be open-minded, right? And you guys also, when watching, have to be open-minded, because I might say something that's wrong, and that will definitely happen. And also I might not take the viewpoint that some of you might have, so also be open for that. I will also try to be more open-minded myself, in that I will read more challenging things, so things that challenge me cognitively. And that could be, for instance, a suggestion by a friend of mine to read Der Kapital, which is written by Karl Marx, an idea that I might not have gone into really depth with, but apparently I have made my mind about it, the communism, right? That I don't like communism and maybe socialism in the extreme form, which is I suppose portrayed to me being from that individual. I've not read it myself, so that's something I will do in the future. But first, I will be reading this one, The Wealth of Nation, by Adam Smith. Thirdly, these talks are also going to be informative. We're going to learn something new together. We're going to develop new ideas, maybe, hopefully, that will happen. We will also reach new conclusions. While it might be just me at the moment, I might in the future invite other people to talk to. We might, I might be with friends and ask them, well, we're discussing some insightful things. Do you mind if I post this on my social media? And let's just have the camera in the background. We don't need to look at it. This way, it also seems more natural, and the flow will be very human-like, right? And you guys, hopefully in the future, it's going to be more than, I see here one person is with me. It's going to be more than one person, hopefully. And Q and A's and some questions in the comments would also be nice. Might at some point also make this such that we can connect live and we can talk to each other. I don't know how to do that yet, but if it reached that point, then I might do it on another platform, then upload it to YouTube afterwards. I'm not stuck with YouTube. I'm very open-minded. So yes, spontaneous, informative, and open-minded. Those are the three key pillars for Karim Talks About Economics podcast. The agenda that I've thought about for this is first we talk a little bit about what's happening in our everyday, so the news, if something new has happened, and especially in the Corona times. Today it is the 30th of June 2020, right? It's 11:30 at night, so in half an hour it would be the 1st of July. But it's the third, and a lot of happened so far, right? I hope you're still with me. If I go to the Corona outlook, I don't have it right here. I see, but we have hit the the 10,500,000 mark, 500,000 mark, which is quite a significant number because it's something we definitely didn't expect. And the death rate is at, well, the death numbers are at 500,000, so the death rate is 5% approximately, which is of course not good, but I think it's not much better than we expected. It's worse, I think. Yeah, it's really not good. It's really not good. And it seems like nothing is really happening. People are opening more and more up. You don't care about this no more, which is not significant. Not good. Meaning that Corona is being insignificant. And we also see that with the stock market. I read, I think it's Yahoo Finance or Bloomberg, that the stock market the past couple of weeks have had the best rise in two decades, right? Which is not something that makes a lot of sense. It really means that the companies are being opportunistic, and that we expect that we can earn a huge profit by investing in these companies. But the thing is with these companies is that they fire more and more people. So Airbus is going to fire 15,000, not 1,500, 15,000. SAS is going to fire 1,593, and they say that we went down from 1,700, so they saved 107 jobs, right? Good, but with all the support they have received, it should have been much more, in my opinion, at least. What else is happening? Well, from tomorrow, the European Union is going to have a ban on non-essential travel from the US, which means that anyone that tries to travel from the US and want to come to the Euro area, well, they really need to have a pretty good reason to do that. It's indefinite, I think. What else is happening? Anything interesting that happened today? Well, the Danish numbers are still continuously being low. I think today it was 17, no deaths. While Norway is also at 17 with 1 death. So for once, for the first time, we're doing better than Norway, which is quite fascinating, right? Because they closed more than us. They had a little bit more control of it. One could argue at the beginning, but now apparently we've reached the same stage, which is pretty good. It has to be said that I live in Denmark for the international that we're going to be watching. Yes, so the first thing that I will be talking about, as I said in this podcast, is going to be the news, which I think for this first podcast, I've covered that. Secondly, I'm going to make a follow-up from last time. So we might have discussed something, or I might have said something that I've noticed to be incorrect, thought a little bit more about it. So an interesting thought maybe that I develop along as the podcast develops. Thirdly, we'll be reading something. We'll be reading we'll be reading from a book that I'm reading in personally, and that's going for the time being to be Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nation. And as you can see, we're not going to start from the very beginning, but we're going to start somewhere here from this banknote. I also have a ticket here, which I think I'm just going to remove, but it says of system of political economy, and I'm very interested in political economy. Okay, I might just leave it. You see, spontaneous. This is a banknote from Germany from 1910. It's right before the hyperinflation they had. This is already 1,000 Reichsmarks and Reichsbank note. And then it says a lot of things in German. Yeah, might give it to a German person just so they can read it for me, because also the text is a little bit, yeah, I don't wanna risk offending any German people. But yeah, the idea is that I read something, and as I read it out loud, of course, to you guys. So we're together. You get the feeling, you get the sense that we're together. And whenever it's interesting, I stop, I discuss it, or at least I say out loud my thoughts about this. Maybe it's so interesting that it actually relates to the modern economy, or maybe that I've read it in a scientific article, and maybe this way I confirm the ideas in the Wealth of Nation, or maybe it's something that I'm against, and I think he's wrong there, and then I write about it. But yeah, this can of course also go to the book that I'm writing on the side. So yeah, the fourth point is going to be new thoughts. That of course relates back to the follow-up, but it also relates to the reading. In the sense that the reading will lead us to new thoughts. That means that I might take some notes while I read, right? While I read, I stop, say something that's interesting, comment on it. But these comments might be articulated in a new form, such that we may have developed new ideas or something like that. And these new ideas we can then discuss in the fifth part of this podcast, which is going to be a Q&A. So of course, if you have questions, then I'm going to answer them. If you don't, I'm going to ask myself some questions spontaneously, of course, not something that I've prepared. Maybe it also is something that I've prepared. Yeah, and how does the new thoughts relate to follow up from last time? Well, that is right, something, so it stems from the reading, comment, idea. Okay, what is this really? Maybe the idea is so interesting that I think about it while I sleep. Okay, and the good thing is that I'm unemployed now. This is of course spontaneous, but maybe as we progress, it's going to be more and more planned, at least some parts of it, but the spontaneity is still going to be there, because otherwise it's not a podcast. You got to think on your feet. At least that's what I've experienced from the other ones. Now, of course, if there are multiple people, then the host has prepared questions. That might happen if I at some point reach a place where I can actually invite people, reach that point in time. But I think I'm gonna jump right into it and go to the third point. So we've covered the news. There's no last time, so it's reading time. Let me have my book here beside me, my pen, just so I can write some comments if it is. This edition of The Wealth of Nations, this is page 158. And it starts like the following, and it's in the second book. It's my other glasses. Okay. Water. Okay. So let's see if I can actually read out loud. The coffers of such a company too, though they ought to be filled much fuller, yet must empty themselves much faster than if their business was confined within more reasonable bounds, and must require not only a more violent but a more constant and interrupted exertion of expense in order to replenish them. The coin too, which is thus continually drawn in such larger quantities from their coffers, cannot be employed in the circulation of the country. Circulation of the country, it comes in place of a paper which is over and above what can be employed in the circulation, and is therefore over and above what can be employed in it too. But as the coin will not be allowed to lie ideal, it must in one shape or another be sent abroad in order to find that profitable employment which it cannot find at home. At this continual exportation of gold and silver, by enhancing the difficulty, must necessarily enhance still farther the expense of the bank. In finding new gold and silver in order to replenish those coffers which empty themselves so very rapidly, such a company therefore must, in proportion to the forced increase in the business, increase the second article of their expense still more than the first. I actually don't remember what I was reading about, but I can read here that I have a note: benefit of borrowing. I think this is the point where we have banknotes. A banking company, and this is the page before, a banking company which issues more paper than can be employed in the circulation of the country, and of which the excess is continually returned upon them for payment, ought to increase the quantity of gold and silver which they keep at all times in their coffers, not only in the proportion of the excessive increase of their circulation, but in a much greater proportion. Their notes return upon them much faster than in the proportion of the excess of their quantity. Such a company therefore ought to increase the first article of their expense, not only in the proportion of the forced increase of their business, but in a much greater proportion. So that means that suddenly, how I understand this at least, is that the quantity of money increases, right? So by borrowing, by lending money out, the bank has to increase its money supply. That of course lies in the sense that at this point we had the golden standard, right, where you got a note and you could exchange that for some gold, right? Let's suppose that all the paper of a particular bank, which is circulation of the country, can easily absorb and employ amounts exactly to £40,000, and that For answering occasional demand, this bank is obligated to keep at all times, and it covers £10,000 in gold and silver. Should this bank attempt to circulate 44,000 pounds, the 4,000 pounds which are over and above what the circulation can easily absorb and employ will return upon it almost as fast as they are issued. For answering occasional demand, it demands therefore this bank ought to keep at all times in its coffins not 11,000 pounds only, but 14,000 pounds. It will thus gain nothing by the interest of the 4,000 pounds excessive circulation, and it will lose the whole expense of continually collecting 4,000 pounds in gold and silver, which will be continually going out of its coffers as fast as they are brought into them. Had every particular banking company always understood and attended to its own particular interest, circulation never could have been overstocked with paper money. But every particular banking company has not always understood or attended to its own particular interest, and the circulation has frequently been overstocked with paper money. I got the chills because this he predicts a banking crisis. He predicts that these banks are opportunistic. I like this word very much. Being opportunistic, it means that you want to have a profit while you shouldn't, right? Or you're trying to find a profit where you create something that's bad for the rest. Um, that's not good. It's not good. Overstocked with paper money, right? Because in a way he says that there will always be always more money in paper than can be backed by gold. That's how I understand it, at least. What does that mean in our modern day? Well, that's a difficult question. That means that we're going to lend more. So now the bank does, so in modern day it does that in bonds, maybe not banknotes itself, but by bonds, but it doesn't have the money that is required to produce this bond. Sorry, there's something is irritating me. Okay, let's carry on. This is too complex. By issuing too great a quantity of paper, of which the excess has continually returned, in order to be exchanged for gold and silver, the Bank of England was for many years together obligated to coin gold to the extent between 800,000 pounds and a million a year, or at an average about 850,000 pounds. For this great coinage, the bank, in consequence of the worn and degraded state into which gold coin has fallen into a few years ago, was frequently obliged to purchase gold beyond the high price of £4 an ounce, which is soon after issuing it at 4-17, 10.5 an ounce. Those are just numbers. I don't understand what they mean. An ounce, losing in this manner between 1.5 and 3%, losing between 2.5% and 3%. Upon the coinage is so very large a sum, though the bank therefore paid no seigniorage. It's quite interesting that this term is so old. What did it mean? I totally forgot. Seigniorage. Is the difference between the value of the money and the cost to produce and distribute it. Yeah, that's true. 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 So, though the bank therefore paid no seigniorage through the government was probably at the expense of this coinage, the liberty of the government did not prevent altogether the expense of the bank. Okay. The Scotch Bank, in consequence of the acts of the same kind, were all obliged to employ constant agents at London to collect money for them, at an expense which was seldom below 1.5% and 2%. This money was sent down to the wagon and insured by the carriage an additional expense of 0.75%, or 15 shillings on the £100. Those agents were not always able to replenish the coffers and their employers so fast as they were emptied. In this case, the resource of the bank was to draw upon their correspondent in London bills of exchange to the extent of the sum which they wanted. When those correspondents afterwards drew upon them for the payment of these sum, together with the interest of the commission, some of those banks, from the distress into which their excessive circulation had thrown them, had sometimes no other means of satisfying the drought, but that's an interesting quote. Drought of money. You had a drought of money. Drought. But by drawing a second set of bills, either upon the same or upon some other correspondent in London, and the same sum, or rather bills from the same sum, would in this manner make sometimes more than 2 and 3 journeys. The debtor bank, paying always the interest of the commission upon the whole accumulated sum, even those Scotch banks which never distinguished themselves by their extreme imprudence, were sometimes obliged to employ this renounced resource. The gold coin, which was paid out either by the Bank of England or with the Scotch Bank in exchange for that part of their paper which was over and above what could be employed in the circulation of the country, being likewise over and above what could be employed in the circulation, was sometimes sent abroad in the shape of coins, sometimes melted down and sent abroad in the shape of bullion, and sometimes melted down and sold to the Bank of England at the higher price of £4 an ounce. It was the newest, the heaviest, and the best pieces only which were carefully picked out on the whole coin and either sent abroad or melted down. At home, and while they remained in the shape of coin, those heavy pieces were of no more value than the light. But they were of more value abroad, or when melted down into bullion at home. The Bank of England, notwithstanding their great annual coinage, found to their astonishment that there was every year the same scarcity of coin as there had been the year before, and that notwithstanding the great quantity of gold and new coin which was every year issued from the bank, the state of the coin, instead of growing better and better, became every year worse and worse. Every year they found themselves under the necessity of coining nearly the same quantity of gold as they had coined the year before. And from that continual rise in the price of gold bullion and the consequence of continual wearing and clipping of the coin, the expense of this great annual coinage became every year greater and greater. The Bank of England, it is to be observed by supplying its own coffers with coin, is indirectly obliged to supply the whole kingdom into which coin is continually flowing from those coffers in a great variety of ways. Whatever coin, therefore, was wanted to support this excessive circulation, both of Scotch and England paper money, whatever vacuities this excessive circulation occasioned in the necessary coin of the kingdom, the Bank of England was obliged to supply them. The Scotch Bank, no doubt, paid all of them very dearly for their own imprudence and inattention, but the Bank of England paid very dearly not only for its own imprudence, but for the much greater imprudence of almost all the Scotch Bank. The over trading of some bold projects in both parts of the United Kingdom was the original cause of this excessive circulation of paper money. What a bank can, with proprietary advance to a merchant or undertake of any kind, is not either the whole capital with which he trades or even any considerable part of that capital, but that part of it only which he would otherwise be obliged to keep by him unemployed and in ready money for answering occasional demands. If the paper money which the bank advances never exceeds this value, it can never exceed the value of the gold and silver which would be necessarily circulate in the country if there was no paper money. It can never exceed the quantity which the circulation of the country can easily absorb and employ. When the bank discounts to a merchant the real bill of exchange drawn by a real creditor upon a real debtor, and which, as soon as it becomes due, is really rapid by the debtor, it only advances to him a part of the value which he would otherwise be obliged to keep by him unemployed and in ready money for answering occasional demands. So that paper and gold are perfect substitutes, how I understand this part. And of course, we also had the very interesting part about the Bank of England actually losing money by producing money. Right? Okay. The payment of the bill, when it becomes due, replaces to the bank the value of what it had advanced together with the interest. The coffers of the bank, so far as its dealings are confined to such customers, resemble a water pond from which, though a stream is occasionally running out, yet another is continuously running in. Fully equal to that which runs out, so that without any further care or attention, the pond keeps always equally or very near equally full. Little or no expense can ever be necessary for the replenishing of the coffers of such a bank. Yeah, I'm going to read a lot about banks now, I understand. Okay, let's see. A merchant without overtrading may frequently have occasion for a sum of ready money, even when he has no bills to discount. When a bank, besides discounting his bills, advances him likewise upon such occasions such sums upon his cash account, and accepts of a piecemeal repayment as the money comes in from the occasional sale of his goods upon the easy terms of banking companies of Scotland, it dispenses him entirely from the necessity of keeping any part of his stock by him unemployed and in ready money for answering occasional demands. When such demands actually come upon him, he can answer them sufficiently from his cash account. The bank, however, in dealing with such customers ought to observe with great attention whether in the course of some short period of 4, 5, 6, or 8 months, for example, the sum of the repayment which is commonly received from them is or is not fully equal to that of the advances which it commonly makes to them. So balance sheet needs to be at 0. Okay. If within the course of such short periods the sum of the repayments from a certain customer is upon most occasionally fully equal to that of the advances, it may safely continue to deal with such customers, though the stream which is in this case occasionally running out from its coffers may be very large. That which is continually running into them must be at least equally large, so that without any further care or attention those coffers are likely to be always equally or very near equally full and scarce, ever to require any extraordinary expense to replenish them. If, on the contrary, the sum of the repayments from a certain other customer falls commonly very much short of the advances which it makes to them, it cannot with any safety continue to deal with such a customer, at least if they continue to deal with this to continue to deal with it in this manner. The stream which is in this case continually running out from its coffers is necessarily much larger than that which is continuously running in, so that unless they are replenished by some great or continual effort of expense, those coffers must soon be exhausted altogether. The banking companies of Scotland accordingly were for a long time very careful to require frequent and regular repayments from all their customers, and did not care to deal with any person, whatever might be his fortune or credit, who did not make what they call frequent and regular operations with them. By this attention, besides saving almost entirely the extraordinary expense of replenishing their coffers, they gained 2 other very considerable advantages. Okay. So what's being discussed at this point, which is I think a little bit interesting, that he says that the perfect bank is a bank that has a balanced budget with its consumers, which means that they put their money, they lend some money and they repay it. Now, Adam Smith's wants it, well, he recognizes the fact that for a bank to be successful, well, then it needs to receive payments on a regular basis that are equal to what the bank gives the individual on the other hand, right? In the sense that, and now I'm interpreting on this text, in the sense that there is this sum, the flow sum is equal to 0. That means that the bank is not being used to really lend money, but just to have your money stored. And for that, they take a fee, right? I have 500 kronas, but I don't want my 500 kronas on me, so I give them to the bank. Now I have a cash account, and then I take some money. But once I take this money, I also need to put something back, and maybe I also don't have the 500. I lend the 500, but when I lend the 500, then I would need to be giving 50, for instance, each month, right? Something like that, such that the 500 are paid off. And that's the sense that what goes out must come in, or what comes in must go out again, because otherwise it's too costly for the bank. It's too costly for the bank. This is not mine, by the way. I got it from work. So what comes in must go out, such that it's not too costly for the bank to have money, because as we just read, it is costly for the banks to have cash on them, or these banknotes on them, right? I think that's it for today. There are going to be 2 advantages tomorrow, and I'm saying that this is it for today, even though I want to continue because I'm a little bit tired. It's, as I said, it was 11:30 when I started, so it's very tiring. Now it's 00:13, which is good with the 42 minutes that I'm in. So from the notes that I've taken, it says here, by lending money, out, which of course makes sense, the bank has to increase its money supply or its money holding. Always more money in paper that can be backed by gold. So maybe that goes in the direction that it was actually a good idea to remove the golden standard, even though that I've thought critically about that before. But maybe it's good, because then the production of money goes to 0. Of course, if it's not physical money, but digital money, and we don't have a high seigniorage, and also it can be produced very fast, and you're not dependent on anyone. You're not dependent first on the commodity price of gold, and you're also not dependent on the world price of gold, right? Yeah. And the thing with money, the money is an exchange of goods. It's not just the exchange of gold, right? So it's taking an extra step where gold is just in between. You have I'm just going to read the third note here, drought of money. That's also related to what we're discussing at the moment, which means that you have a basket of goods. You need money to buy it. Well, why? Because I'm producing a part of this basket of good, and the other person is producing another part. And because maybe my thing is not exactly dividable by the other parts that I want from the society, it's better to have a catalyst or a tool that can be used to measure these things. And that's called money, right? Now, the money I use to buy these commodities. So I sell my commodity, then I buy other people's commodity, right? And your commodity can also be time, right? If you work in a factory, where you're the CEO, for instance, you don't physically produce something, but it's your time that's taken away. It's also worth something. It's the wage discussion that we can go into that at some other point. But yeah, so you have them. You have the goods that you produce, and then you want to trade them. So that's it's a trade society that doesn't work perfectly. It's too complicated because what was the price of milk today and what was it yesterday? And now, of course, it depends on the supply of and the demand, but it would be nice to have maybe a fixed price such that we don't have to guess every single day. And also, so it's not different from one individual to the other. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion there that it's not very stable enough and not scalable enough. So we produce the money. Okay, great. We've produced the money, but now we just exchange the money. So I have something, and okay, 5 money. For this 5 money, I can buy bread, I can buy milk, I can buy wheat, wheat for bread, which you have bought, but yes, now you can bake something else at home. Now, by having a golden standard, you indirectly say, well, this thing that I'm dividing is gold coins, for instance, or gold bars, or grams of gold, right? So it's not 5 money, it's 5 grams of gold. Now we appoint these different commodities gold prices, right? So this is half a gold worth, right? Now we also saw that was too slow, right? What does that mean? Well, it meant that we needed to produce these banknotes. And now you directly had a different scale, right? Because of course you could make it directly equal to the gold bars, right? This paper is worth a gold bar, something like that, right? But what if the price of gold suddenly changed because of the world market? So, as he says, the Spanish Inquisition or the Spanish colonization of the South Americas really produced a lot of gold, right? Which meant that the gold prices would go down. Okay. So now I have my banknotes, and I can use these banknotes to buy goods, but these banknotes are based on the price of gold, so the banknotes might change value from day to day. Interesting. Not because the goods are changed, right? I don't have took my milk production was low today, right? Not because the commodities have suddenly changed and the market has changed, but because of the commodity market of gold itself, right? And that's what I mean by that you have gold in the middle that might not be doing anything, right? So maybe it's a good thing that we remove the golden standard and now we have something fixed, right? Now, money does not mean anything. I don't know. That's not right. It's not right to say. Well, now you have money that can buy commodities. The commodities can change in the market, and therefore they can go up and down, right? Produce 5 milk or produce 6 milks, 6 milk, 7 milk, and suddenly the price of milk goes down because the productivity of producing milk have gone up, for instance. That means that I need less money to buy milk. Now, what usually happens is that maybe the price of milk doesn't go down, but the price of everything else goes up. And now we're in trouble. Because if everything goes up, the price of milk doesn't change, then suddenly, with the money that you have, you can buy less. Which is, of course, the inflation thing. Great. But what if we just wanted you to be able to buy more milk and not to lose and not to change the what if we wanted to expand your basket of goods and not just exchange more milk for less something else, right? Then we need to produce I want to say produce more money. Does that make sense? If we produce more money, then the price of everything can go up and the price of milk goes down, or the price of milk stays, but let's assume that the wages also go up. Well, in that sense, yes. Right? Okay, but let's think of it differently. What would have happened if we did not increase the money supply or the amount of money in the society? Well, maybe the price of milk would just have gone down, wouldn't it? Might be relating that to the golden standard, right? That you cannot really you cannot really control how much you cannot really just expand the money, right? It's not fiat currency, right? Because we're not measuring it in money, but we're measuring it in gold, for instance. And let's say that we've exploited all the gold mines and we cannot find any new ones. So we have all the gold in the world and that is in circulation at the moment. Well, what now? Right? Is it better to increase the prices of everything and keep milk at the same level? Or is it better to decrease the price of milk? Well, in the real economy, both things happen, right? You might find that both things happen. What does that mean? Well, it means that the market works in a very weird way that we cannot really control. Luckily, we cannot control them because we don't have full information of anything. But yeah, the discussion was: is gold then necessary, or is it not? Well, depends, right? If you want the price of milk to go down or not. Now, for measurement and to make people feel that they have more money, maybe it is better to just let the price of milk stay and the price of everything to rise. Now, the price of everything will rise automatically because of the reaction to the increased money supply. Now, what if how would you, because the thing is you don't want to just how do you increase the money supply? Well, in that case you would have to increase the money supply by the amount of increase in the productivity of the milk production, such that the thing reflected in the rise of price of everything else. Now the rise of and the price of everything else is going to be very, very small. That's of course under the assumption that we're consuming, the individual has to stay at the same utility level. Of course, he has more money, so maybe that's better. he feels better, but realistically, he doesn't have more money. Um, because we're talking about buying power, right? We're not talking about the actual physical commodity of money. Uh, yeah, this is a part, but but I'm trying. So what does it mean? What does money really? Now I'm done with my coffee. Um, Interesting discussion. That's why I have people in the central bank. What is Adam Smith have talked about this so much. What is money? And I understand why he've written pages and pages and pages about this. Right? What is coin? Right? Where does gold come from? Things like that. Because um, the value of money if it's based on the gold, right? Because then you really need to understand the gold market and how that works. So that's of course an argument to remove gold entirely. Now you're faced with the other problem that now you don't have to control the gold, right, and leave the market to look at gold and then reflect how it is going. But now you, as a central bank, have to predict the market itself. Um, Now, of course, I think you can use the forex market instead to look at how do the market value my currency. And previously, it is how the market valued your how the market valued gold. But now it's about how the market value your currency, right? But now, of course, that's beautiful, but it's unrelated, I think, to the market itself. But it is the market that is the forex market. The forex market is just some traders, right? It's not really people that sit in another market, the producers of goods, because they need to evaluate, well, what is this dollar worth, for instance? What is this euro worth? It's also quite an interesting thought to think, well, and now we go back to the news thing. Well, why did we print more money in the crisis? Because we need more liquidity, because we don't want to have a drought, right? One of the notes that I have here, we don't want a drought. But why would there be a drought in the first place? Well, it's not from the demand side, because the demand has gone down. So how can the drought be from the supply side? Well, they have to pay costs of running the company, of course, in the Corona time. So in that sense, yes, you don't want to have a drought there. That is thinking really, really. No, I think that makes sense. Well, the thing is, I think with the Corona thing, you wanted the economy to be productive while it was on shutdown, and that is by artificially printing more money, right? So instead of actually being productive, you just produced money that was worth the wages of all the. You produced enough money that it covered the productivity of all the individual, or you tried to, the productivity of the country in those 2 months. Um, and I'm talking about the US because it's such a big economy, and it was the one that made it on a very large scale. So you wanted to produce enough money such that you could cover the productivity of the entire economy, right? Interesting, interesting, interesting. And then you wanted to give that money to the supply side because you value them as being the ones that would have been productive. But of course, they would not have ever been productive without their workers. But now that they are firing their workers, maybe the money is going to the wrong people, because money is not just going to a company; it's going to people in the company. That's something that we don't have to forget. So, of course, if you can maintain someone is getting richer from this, definitely, right? And so far as the stock market has risen, it means, and I can of course only do this ex post, right? This is an analysis ex post, it's not an ex ante analysis. Well, it might turn into that from what we see here with this discussion, but we see that the central, okay, so where are we? I said that the stock market has gone up, right? Because the money produced, because the argument is okay. So you don't want the economy to fail. You don't want to produce a drought in the economy such that people cannot buy and sell. You have no production, that's the problem. Fine. You want to artificially produce things, right? And you do that by printing the money. And that's productivity, right? Because productivity equal money that you can exchange for goods. Now, interestingly enough, this money is not being used on products because there is no demand, right? And this money is not going to the people that are going to make the demand. It's also quite an interesting note that one should have in mind, right? It's going to the companies that would have been productive had they been open. Now, what does the company do with this money? Well, it goes to someone. It doesn't go to the company. Now, the company can do some research and development. It can pay it out as wages such that the workers earn money without being productive. Well, if the workers are earning money without being productive, it means that instead of producing a physical product, you're producing money. Okay. It means that you've suddenly lost the value of money. It means that, of course, all money, there's going, I don't know, I've never had monetary economics, but there's going to be a shift in the money. Well, I've had macroeconomics. So we're going to have a shift in the money supply. I have to read about this. Right. And if you have such a shift, what then happens is that you've produced money for no reason. I wanted to buy a banana. Luckily, the farms are still productive. I wanted to buy a banana. Someone makes this banana. This person could not make the banana. This person receives money that the banana would have costed. Now I buy the banana from him. There's no banana. What do? Well, I can't buy the banana, so there's no demand. But he has the money that goes in producing the banana, so can I buy the money from him? But I cannot consume the banana, so it's ridiculous. What else would you have done? So I've not always, but I've thought about, well, why didn't you just give it to the demand side instead of giving it to the supply side? Give it to the worker directly instead of giving it to the companies, right? The helicopter money idea. Maybe a negative income tax even, right? I think they should have done that instead. But let's see why. Maybe my argument is incorrect, and that comes with the spontaneity and being open-minded. You give the money to people that would be demanding things. I want a banana. Now, I had the money to buy the banana before. Now the banana is not being produced. Do I want more money? Well, if the banana is never going to be produced, it doesn't matter how much money I have. If the demand side of the market has more money, right, but the goods produced are the same, okay, that was pretty stupid of me to say that you should have given the money to the demand side. But you should have given it to people that cannot afford rent. That makes perfect sense. No, don't give it to the people that want rent. Don't give it to people to pay rent. Give it to the owners so they do not require rent. Because if all the demanders have more money, but the product is the same or there is no product at all, well then whenever there's going to be a product, they are willing to pay a much higher price for the product, which is of course inflation. So that's something we of course don't want. But if there is no product, there's no point of giving the demanders more that they can exchange for. Now, of course, the US is more complicated than that because it has a lot of poor people and there's enough goods out there, right? Now, giving the money to the supply side might help them produce more. But the thing is, they are not producing, and it costs them money to have this money. So they will not have this money. They will give it away. And that's why the stock market is going up. We're expecting this, I think. Expecting. But that, of course, then goes back to the demanders, right? Then the demanders have more money, but it's a specific group of demanders. It's not all demanders. It's just a specific group of demanders. So, for instance, I have, let's say I've earned 4,000 kronas in the stock market. But there's no banana that I can buy. Well, what can I use the 4,000 for? So the thing is, if all people have had their money in the stock market, it meant that all the prices would rise in the stock market because demand would increase and inflation of prices. Now, you don't want an inflation in prices because it makes no sense if they cannot give you what you expect of them in the future. In the sense that the price increases make no earthly sense, because it has to be realistic, right? You have to be able to, the company needs to be able to earn that price at the end. So yeah, if we go back, maybe the golden standard is just, yeah, it's an easy way of counting it, but the more advanced the world now has become, the more difficult it is to have gold in the middle between the money market and the commodity market, right? But now, of course, also by having the gold, you made it a little bit more stable. It's a natural stabilizer in the sense that you print too much money. Well, gold is going to take care of that, right? If you have more gold, do it as much as you want. But if you don't have a lot of gold, well, then you really can't do it. Now, of course, we're prone to more human error in this world, but we we might also be much faster than previous generations, a lot much faster. Now the problem is, no, not the problem. I mean, um, the thing that is keeping all of this in check is the forex market in a way, right? Because they really tell us, well, what's my currency worth uh, in respect to something else, and in this case, it's other currencies. Um, if the currencies cannot be exchanged, and that's really what gold was, right? It was one common commodity that could be exchanged across the world, and you had kind of an idea of what it was worth. Now, of course, it was worth different between country to country because of its scarcity. Um, but that also happens with fiat currencies now, right? So it's really the people that sit in the forex market that really control how much is the dollar worth, how much is the British pound worth, and how are they related to one another, right? And that's also a risky business. If I don't know, but it is a risky business to have people. Yeah, but then again, it was people that were in charge of the price of gold. So does it matter? That's the big question. I think that's the big new idea that I'm gonna leave for next time. Um, does it matter? And of course, that's also a conclusion that I might be a little bit hesitant about taking to public. Um, does it matter whether um, money is controlled by gold or the forex market? That means nature. Well, gold is not really nature, but it can be talked about a little bit like nature because it's from gold mines and there's a specific amount of it. And with forex, that means humans, right? So you want it to be controlled by nature or humans. It's a big discussion. Thank you for staying tuned. It's 1 hour and 15 minutes. Maybe too long. I want to keep it at an hour, maybe also 2 hours. Who knows? Let's see where this goes. As I progress and have a better structure of this, I will also start posting about it. And also when I have a kind of like 10 episodes, maybe also 15 or 20, just so I see the consistency, right? If there's consistency, then I dare to say that it might also happen tomorrow. That is only realistic to think, right? Thank you and take care. Well, I need an outro. This was Karim Talks About Economics with Adam Smith, his thoughts about banking. Thanks for staying tuned, and I hope to see you all again tomorrow. Good night. Sleep tight. Nah, that's not how I want to end it. I want to end it with a hopeful note, as I also did with the bachelors, something that motivates you. So, guys, and I'm not gonna say Karim anymore. I'm gonna say guys. I might also say Karim, but let's say. So, guys, take care. Be spontaneous. Right? I think that's the best thing that I got out of today. Being spontaneous, being able to think this way, think freely, but also be open-minded, and know that you might be wrong. Other people might know better than you. That's why I'm referring to Adam Smith. He, of course, I'd like to argue that he knows more than me, but I know what's going to happen. So I know if either he's right or wrong, but he knows more than me. So he gives me new information. I discuss that with myself. If it goes well, then I will discuss it with other people. And that's the thing. Know yourself and be comfortable with yourself, but also be willing to expand on yourself and to challenge yourself. Push yourself. Don't settle. Always try to be better. Doesn't matter. And get up, man. Just go do it. Just go do it. A plan, fine. Pretty good. Pretty important also. But action is also necessary. Action is very necessary. It really is. I'm unemployed, and I think I have to let myself really digest that thought. Digest the thought that I'm unemployed, which is not great. And I need to do something about it, and this is the first step. So, Karim, tomorrow, say the next step. Bye.